but we do have a pastor today, Pastor Gary Odoms. He's going to preach for us today. Come on up, buddy.
Thank you. You know, if you walked into your church Sunday morning, you found, go ahead and have a seat. Found out that, unless you want to stand there and the whole sermon, I don't care. Yeah, it's a funny thing about preachers, you know, when people are standing, it looks like there's a lot more people than there are. So for my own ego. Yeah, that's right. But what if you came in here one Sunday morning and you'd found out that, say, Billy and Ben and James and Mike and even Marie back there had come in on Saturday, and they had put all kinds of stuff up and down this middle aisle here. They had put some garbage from their garbage cans. They had brought a whole bunch of little paper clips and thrown them up down here. They got a lot of Coke cans and thrown them, a lot of Coke bottles, and they were just thrown all over the place. Then they had a lot of old newspapers. They crumpled up and just threw them down here. Then they had some other pieces of iron and metal and kind of threw that out there too. Then they went out here to the parking lot and got a bunch of rocks and just kind of threw it up and down here. Well, first place, you kind of wonder what they're up to, right? But then you got all this stuff in there, and then what if you came in with a big electric magnet, you know, one that's about that big, about that thick, and super powerful, and it was hooked up, and it just kind of hovered over all of that stuff in that aisle. What would it pick up? All the metal, right? The paper, the rocks, the glass, the garbage. It wouldn't attract it. See, a magnet attracts metal. And this morning we're going to talk about the magnetism of the cross. You know, Jesus says, he said that if I be lifted up, I will draw men unto me. Now, what types of person is he going to draw into him? In fact, that's in John 12:32. It says, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. So what we can see is that we're going to talk this morning about the magnetism of the cross. See, the cross of Christ, it has a magnetism still. We might think in this crazy changing world that nobody's interested anymore in Jesus, but let me tell you, they are. They are. But we have to identify who it is, and we need to lift the cross of Jesus up. And he will draw people unto himself, just like he's been doing for the last 2,000 years. See, the cross of Christ has a magnetism. As I said earlier, Jesus said that if I be lifted up from the earth on the cross, I will draw men to me. So it draws what type of people? Repentant sinners. It draws those who are broken, those who have no more pride, those whose self-sufficiency has been stripped away. And it's just like a magnet that only draws the metal and all the other stuff stays there. The cross of Christ will draw those who are tired of the emptiness of what this world offers. It will still draw repentant sinners, draw those who have no pride, draw those whose self-sufficiency, they've come to a point and they said, you know what, I give up. I give up. I don't like what the world has to offer. I personally have no answers, but I'm going to look to Jesus, and like a magnet, he draws people to him. And so our responsibility as a church and as Christians is to lift up the cross of Christ. And it'll draw people. Some people it won't draw. It won't draw everyone, just like the magnet would draw the paper or the rocks or other things, but it did draw the metal. The cross of Christ will draw those who are ready. But everybody else, they're not ready yet. Maybe one day they will be. Our job is to continually lift up that cross and let Jesus draw people unto him. See, so we can just keep lifting up the cross of Christ. See, the cross has the magnetism of love. In the cross of Christ, we see the love of God like in no other way. As we can understand that Jesus is the one who draws. That is why persons are still drawn to Him. Because there's love in no other way. You know, I've gone downtown Asheville sometimes, and I'll see, you know, kind of where a certain statue used to be, and they've got love and peace, you know, and all those signs and everything. And those of us who were around in the late 60s, that's old news. That's nothing. Guess what? It didn't work then, and it ain't going to work now. What is love? What is love? It's not just you and me being buddies to each other or even treating each other with respect. It's way beyond that. It's the love of God who sees us and does for us what we are incapable of doing for ourselves. So when we lift up the cross of Jesus, the cross has the magnetism of God's love. And the cross of Christ also has the magnetism of forgiveness. See, man's greatest need is for forgiveness of sin. Oh, sure, there's times when people need a few dollars to get by the next week or two, but that's not going to do much other than just for a week or two. People need some friends sometimes, and that's good, but what's it going to do? Man's greatest need is for the total 100% permanent forgiveness of sin once and for all. And once that message is out there, people will be drawn to Christ. See, we have all sinned and come short of God's expectations and His glory. The scriptures tell us that there is only one way to heaven. There's not a lot of ways to heaven. No, as much as we as human beings want to believe that, it's just simply not true. It's not like we go to a buffet and pick what we want and reject what we have. And we can't do it for ourselves, but what Jesus has done, He's done for us what we cannot do for ourselves. See, we need to lift the cross up. And if you think you get discouraged if you listen to much news, and I would advise you to stay informed, but at the same time, turn that old TV set off. You know, there's a bunch of bobbleheads up there talking about stuff that they're unstudied and have their highly biased opinions. You know, you ever get tired of all that? Turn it off. But at the same time, we can look at the world and we say, man, are things crazy? Has it ever been this bad before? I've heard people say, well, yeah, it has. All in history, it's been just as bad as it is now. We might have more media that bombards us with it all the time that we have not had in history. But people are tired. People want to hear something. They're looking for answers. And guess what? The church has that the world does not have. See, we can never out-activity the world. We can never out-program the world. We can never out-entertain the world. Now, churches should have activities and should have programs and should have good organization. There's no doubt about that. But we're always going to be behind what the professionalism of the world is going to do. But what do we have that they don't have? We have the cross of Christ. And if we lift up Jesus, He will continually draw people to Himself. And that's the responsibility of us as a church. We need to get the cross out there. You know, Jesus, we need to take it to the streets, to the marketplaces, the story of Christ on the cross. We need to take it out to the neighborhoods. Not only inside the church building should we lift up the cross of Christ, but we should lift it up perhaps even more outside of the church building. You know, we need to take it to the highways and the byways and things. You know, Jesus was crucified between two thieves, not between two pews. He was crucified over a garbage dump where people cursed and gambled and stole. And that's where we need to take the cross of Christ, because eventually there's going to be people who get tired of that, and they're going to be just like that metal. They're going to be ready. They're ready. They said nothing else has happened. We tell them about Jesus, and they're sucked to the cross just like a piece of metal is sucked to a magnet. So the magnetism of the cross is still a very, very powerful message. Not only does the cross have the magnetism of love and the magnetism of forgiveness, it also has the magnetism of victory. And I'm not talking about some temporary victory, where your favorite team wins the conference championship. That's good. But the next year, you got to do it all over again, and they might not win the conference championship that year. Your favorite team could win the Super Bowl, and you can celebrate for a while, but the next year, somebody else wins. So that's a very short-lived victory. As fun as they are not eternal answers. So the magnetism of the cross brings God's love, and the magnetism of the cross offers forgiveness that they can't find anywhere else. And the magnetism of the cross has the magnetism of victory, permanent victory. See, it marked the defeat of Satan and the victory of Christ over time and eternity. See, the cross was really a battle between light and darkness. It was a battle between good and evil, and Jesus emerged the victor. It's not just a good story of a good possible way to live. It is the ultimate victory of what's wrong with this world. See, the victor was Jesus, and the cross is that ultimate permanent victory. What's the old hymn we sing? Victory in Jesus, my Savior, what? Forever. Not just for a few days or not till things turn bad, but He is my Savior forever. So the magnetism of the cross has the draw of love, God's love, the draw of forgiveness. People can't receive forgiveness anywhere else but through the cross of Jesus. It has the magnetism of victory also. So forgiveness constantly is what people are ultimately looking for. And this is something I've learned sharing the gospel. I used to get a little frustrated when people didn't really want to hear about Jesus. And sometimes I found myself even arguing with people. I don't argue with anyone anymore because that makes nobody happy and there's no profit in it, and it does nothing for anyone. If someone wants to argue, they're not ready. They're not ready. So what I've learned over the years is to look for hungry people. Hungry for God. Look for thirsty people. People who are thirsty for God. If someone is not hungry and they've just come from a big Thanksgiving dinner, and you offer them a sandwich, they'll go, oh, no, I'm not ready for that right now. But if someone is hungry and you offer something to eat, they'll take it. That's the same thing with the gospel. Look for hungry people. Look for the thirsty people. Look for people who are tired of searching for answers in this world and in their own life. And when they're ready, just lift up the cross of Christ and they'll be drawn to Jesus. Ask God to show you who's ready for the gospel. Don't try to convince somebody that's not ready to be convinced. Oh, you can leave them with a few verses or a line or two, but move on and find that person that God is working in their lives, that they're thirsty, they're hungry, and they're ready to be drawn to the magnetism of the cross. So in the cross, we have the magnetism of love and forgiveness and permanent victory. And then what? Then what, you might say? Then heaven is yours. Not only does He change your life here for the better, but more importantly, you have a ticket into heaven. That's what everybody wants to do. Heaven can be yours. See, life's greatest certainty is death. We hear that death and taxes, but you know what? There's some people that can weasel out of taxes, can't they? But nobody can weasel out of death. So life's greatest certainty is death. See, death has scared and stalked its prey throughout the centuries. From the beginning of mankind, started in the garden. It started with Cain and Abel, and ever since death's introduction, death has a hold on people in its power and its fear. A lot of people are afraid of death because of the unknown. Because they're not sure what's going to happen. Or they might think, oh no, it's all over. My life here is all gone. But Jesus comes in and says, you don't have to worry about all of that. This is a short time, but heaven can be yours. And that's what separates Christianity from other religions of the world. Let's look at some verses here in John chapter 14. The first 6 verses here. We can see that Jesus talks about these verses here, and we go on down to these verses, and we get down to verse 5. You know, Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How do we know the way? You know, Thomas gets a little bit of a bad name sometimes. What's he called? Sometimes Thomas the Doubter. But you know what? He was really Thomas the Confessor. When he went up to Jesus and said, I'm not going to believe till you show me your hands, you know, he was simply asking a question. But after Jesus showed him his hands, Thomas went to other parts of the world, and for the rest of his life, he was confessing Jesus as Lord. So Thomas was not necessarily a doubter nearly as much as he was Thomas the Confessor. And here Thomas comes in again, and he asks Jesus this question. Says, where are you going? How do we know all this thing? And then in the next verse, Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me. See, if Thomas hadn't asked him that question, who knows? We might not have had that verse. So don't look at Thomas as being the doubter. He's the confessor and the question asker and the clarifier. And it was Jesus himself who said, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me. Now, the world would like to paint Jesus as some sort of a narrow-minded, perhaps prideful individual that was saying, nobody can come to the Father except through me. That's not the way he said that. He said, look, you've been looking for the way. You've been searching for the entrance. Here it is. Here's the good news. So he has brought us good news that he is the way and he is the truth and that he is the life. So the magnetism of the cross constantly has its power, and it draws men unto him so that heaven can be theirs. And like it says in John 14, in those verses that we read 1 through 6, also we can find out that heaven is real. Heaven is real. It's not some figment of our imagination. It's not some hope for that we cross our fingers and say, boy, I hope that's true. It is true. It is true. It's as true as this podium right here in front of me. More true than that, because one day this is going to rot. It's going to decay and be gone. But Jesus, heaven is permanent. It's always there. And some people say, well, that sounds too good to be true. Well, you know, it might sound too good to be true, but it's true. And that's the good news. So heaven is real. It can be ours. It's not a figment of man's imagination. It's not some sort of fuzzy state of mind. I've even heard pastors say, well, heaven is really kind of a state of mind. It's not. It's a place. Jesus said that I go and prepare a what? A place for you. Now, he gives us a lot of information in the book of the Revelation about what that's going to look like. But even then, I imagine it's not total description of what we can understand. You know, I was in our house a few months ago. I was walking by one of our windows, and we have a kind of a pretty view of some mountains there, and I kind of stopped. I've seen those views a lot, and I just stopped and I looked, and I thought, wow. And then God kind of showed me. It wasn't necessarily a vision, but it was an awareness that one day I'm going to be standing in heaven. Even though I know that, I'm still going to be amazed. I'm still going to be looking, and I'm going to go, wow, look at that. You know, it's going to be indescribable. And it's going to be permanent. And it's going to be peaceful. And that's what the earth and creation was supposed to be until sin entered it. And that's what the cross of Christ is, and what the magnetism of the cross is that when we lift up Christ, he will draw people to him. just keep lifting it up. He'll draw some people. There may be some drought times. I don't know. There'll be other times when a lot of people come to Him. But our responsibility is to lift up the cross of Christ. Look for the hungry. Look for those that are thirsty. Look for those who are really tired of what this world has to offer. And they've come to the cross of Christ. And that heaven is real. It is a place. It's not just a figment of our imagination. It's kind of like the little girl who was visiting Yellowstone National Park with her family. And she said, Dad, if this side of heaven is so beautiful in a place like Yellowstone, what's the right side of heaven going to look like? If the wrong side of heaven is so beautiful, just imagine what the right side is going to look like. And that's kind of the way I felt that time when I was gazing at the mountain. I thought, those are beautiful. But then God let me know, that's nothing compared to what you're going to see one day. And it's going to be there every day. So heaven is a place. It is absolutely real. And guess what? Heaven is ready. It's ready. Jesus has blazed the way for us to enter heaven. And heaven is also very, very reachable. You know, sometimes we think, how do you get to heaven? Still, as much as the message of Christ has been around, most people still believe something like this. Well, I got to do enough good stuff to get there. That's scary if you think about it. Because, you know, it's not like a test that you pass. No, I was an average student in high school, but I remember we had a couple of kids in our high school class that they made 98s, 99s almost on every test, and 100. But, you know, if you're depending on getting to heaven yourself, you got to make 100 on every single exam, every single day. It's not like you can make 80% and pass. One thing I liked about it in high school, I make a 70 and I was free. I was ready to go, you know. I was even one of those guys that I got not my calculator, but I did the figuring out, you know, and somebody asked me, said, Gary, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm figuring out how low a score I can make on the final exam and still pass the course. Well, that's kind of the way we do now. What can I do to get into heaven? No matter what you do or I do, it's not going to be good enough. And that's the good news. See, it's not making a 75% or 90% or 98%. It's making 100% every time. It's as simple as this. It's a pass-fail exam. You either pass it or you fail it. Now, here's the good news. With Jesus, you've passed it. Now, you might say, that sounds kind of harsh. What about somebody who did a 90 every day in life? They made 98 every day. Here's the problem. There's still that little bit of sin in there, isn't there? And see, you can't take sin to heaven. It doesn't mix. It doesn't mix. It's like oil and water. No matter if you could be a person who lives 98% of your life good and you've only got a small 2% of sin, you think, whoa, that's good. You're probably outliving most people in the moral schedule of things. But here's the deal. You can't take even one speck of sin to heaven with you. Because sin and heaven do not mix. And if that were the case, all we'd be doing is recreating what we've got here. A sinful mess. And a temporary thing. So heaven is attainable. It's real. It's ready. And it is very, very reachable. Jesus said that He is the way, He is the truth, and that He is the life. So, you know, we just need to lift up the magnetism of the cross. Wherever you go, just get a powerful verse, share your testimony. You know, one of my favorite stories in the Bible is when Jesus healed the blind man. And evidently there was another group of people around, Pharisees, wanting to sort of bicker with him and argue with him and ask him some questions. And finally, here's what he said. He said, I don't know. All I know is once I was blind, but now I see. If you ever run into somebody who wants to debate things with you, probably they're not ready, unless they're asking sincere questions and then spend some time. But if they're just wanting to debate and argue, just say, you know what, I don't know. All I know is I asked Jesus Christ into my life, and He forgave me of my sins. And I believe that He's going to take me to heaven one day. That's all I know. That's a powerful way of lifting up the cross of Christ. And who knows, everybody has to make their own decision. So we can just lift up the cross of Christ wherever we go. And we can remember that the cross has the magnetism of love. It has the magnetism of forgiveness. People can't find forgiveness anywhere else in this world but through the cross of Christ. And that's what makes a church distinctive from anything else. Oh, we can have fellowships here. We can have potlucks, but they can have those other places too. We can have activities here, but they have those things other places, and we need to have some of those things. We need to have fellowship and some activities in churches. But here's what the church has that no other institution or organization in the world has, and that's the cross of Christ. The story of Jesus, a personal one-on-one relationship with Jesus Christ. So we can lift up this magnet cross to draw people, the magnetism of love and the magnetism of victory. And heaven can be theirs. It can be yours because it is real. It is ready. And it is very, very, very reachable. And Jesus said that He is the way. Without Jesus, there is no going. Jesus says He is the truth. Without Him, there is no knowing. And Jesus says that He is the life. Without Him, there is no growing. So we want to go to heaven, we have to go through Jesus. We want to know the truth, we have to know it through Jesus. We want to grow in this life here, we have to do it through Jesus. The magnetism of the cross can draw you and others to heaven. I don't know where you're at in your life here, but as we get ready for our response time, I want you to think about yourself. Are you sure you're going to heaven? Have you trusted Jesus and just said, I give up? The only way to win in Christianity is to surrender. You have to surrender to obtain the victory. Have you come to that point in your life where you have been drawn to Jesus? Or is it just a cultural thing to you? There are a lot of cultural Christians around. Come to church, believe in God, so they say. Maybe they do, maybe they're not. I don't know. But I know this. If you crawl into an oven, that don't make you a biscuit. If you come to church, that don't necessarily make you a Christian. Have you got that personal relationship with Christ? If not, this morning you could just simply ask Him into your life. And it's not hard. It's easy. He makes it easy. He makes it very easy. All you have to say is, Lord, I ask for forgiveness of all my sins. I ask you into my life. And you may not understand all of it. You don't have to understand it all. Just accept what you do know. And this morning you might just want to come down and say, you know what? I've asked Jesus into my life. And I'm tired of what this world has to offer. And I want to live the rest of my life for Christ. Maybe you're here this morning, you've done all that. You feel good about that, and congratulations. But maybe you're not lifting up that cross of Christ like you could and should. You've been making it too hard. It's easy. Just lift up the cross of Christ, the simple but powerful story of salvation, and He will draw people to Himself. See, we're just messenger boys here. We don't have to have everything figured out. If you worked for a courier downtown and you had a bicycle and your job, you've been to New York City or places and you see couriers on bicycles, and what they do, they go to this big old office building and they get a packet of stuff, a little package, and they get on their bicycle and they deliver it to the next office. You know what their job is? Pick up the package, deliver it to where it's supposed to go. They're not supposed to stop and look at it and change things around and say, well, I don't know about this. See, we're just messenger boys. We have a very powerful responsibility, but our job is to receive the message and take it to someone else. And what they do with it is totally 100% up to them. So if you're here this morning and you know that heaven is yours and you have the victory of Jesus on the cross, but you want to be that person who helps Jesus draw people to Himself, maybe this morning you might say, Lord, Help me to be a better witness, verbal witness for you. Maybe there's things in your life that's going on, honestly, that's just a mess. You know, the good thing about preaching in churches where I don't know anybody is I can just say what I want to say. And maybe there's some stuff going on in your life you got no business dabbling with. Maybe on Facebook, you're flirting with that old girlfriend. Maybe you're just being mean on Facebook, joining those wars. Maybe there's things going on at work. You're gossiping about people that you really need to get away from that. You're better than that because you're a Christian. Maybe there's personal things in your life that you need to say, Lord, I need to resurrender. You don't have to tell nobody what that is. It's nobody's business but yours and God's. But during this time of invitation, if you want to come down and kneel at the altar, you can do that. Maybe you need to respond for this invitation because you got family members or friends that, as far as you know, they don't know Jesus. You wish they did. But have you really been praying for them? You know, prayer opens a lot of doors. Prayer does what we cannot do ourselves. So this time of response is for you if you've never accepted Christ as your Savior, or you're not even sure about that. Or if you've never joined this church, or you've never been baptism, you know, Josh can talk to you about that if you need to follow in baptism. If you're here and you just want to be a better witness for Christ, this response time is for you. If you got some stuff going on in your life, you need to stop. This is for you. If there's someone you need to pray for, this time is for you. If you feel good about coming down and just turning these front pews into an altar, that's totally up to you. If you feel like you can just sit where you are, confess, pray, whatever you need to do, you do that. But these pews are open. I'm just going to ask that we stand, and this time of response is in your hands.